Sonic the Hedgehog and Five Nights at Freddy's. Two very different franchises that are completely different from each other. Or are they? You see, 2 years ago, I actually managed to watch this video from a YouTuber called MR Springs, or Mr. Springs, if that's actually how you want to call it. But anyways, I actually saw this video literally from all the way from beginning to end. It's called Weird Similarities Between Fnaf and Sonic. And to be very fair, he actually did have a bit of a point. Now, I know this was apparently like a pointless video to talk about the similarities between the two franchises, but in some cases, I cannot lie. I mean, he did have a pretty good points when it came to some of the very, very big similarities between the two franchises, even when you think that, it's completely pointless actually talking about it. Trust me when I tell you, when I thought about it myself, I realized that, you know what? This guy actually has a good point. So yeah, pretty much I'm going to be talking about the exact same thing. Well, not really, but I'm going to see if I can try to put this into a little bit more detail than how MR Springs put it. But to see if I can actually make sense on how it actually would be between the two. Because trust me, when you think about it, there's like so many things that like are very, very, very similar in terms of not and I'm not just talking about gameplay wise. The gameplay, of course, is completely different between them, no matter what kind of versions of both of these franchises you actually have. Oh no, we're talking about things that are much, much deeper here. So, let's go straight into it. One of the very main basic things about when it comes to both Sonic and also Five Nights at Freddy's is the lore. And trust me when I tell you, exactly what MR Springs actually did mention was the lore itself in pretty much both games. Pretty much there's always going to be so much lore depending on which type of version of Sonic or FNAF that you actually have. And it's not just from the games either. Let's not forget about the books. Oh yes, the books. I'm not just talking about the FNAF books in general, like, the Silver Eyes trilogy, the Fazbear Frights novels, the Tales of the Mega Pizzaplex novels, but when you also take a look into Sonic, for instances, do you know how many freaking comic books they have? They have several different types of freaking comic books. Each one of them that have their individual lores that are completely different from the rest. You may probably think that each and every single one of them is completely connected, but no, they're trust me when I tell you, they're all different. Take for the Archie comics, for example, which is basically based from the original Sonic the Hedgehog one, which also went through Sonic CD. But that's a completely different canon, completely on its own, especially when it comes to, comparing Sonic to CD from the games. And that's just only one stepping stone. What about the Sonic Archie comics based on the Sonic anime Sonic X? Well, technically speaking, that may or may not be connected to the Sonic X anime. The Sonic X Archie comics might probably also be very different compared to the anime of it, or unless, maybe they are kind of the same. I guess they are kind of both connected in some way, but I'm not quite sure. Well, hey, at least we get to see Metal Sonic in the freaking Sonic X Archie comics, which specifically was never in the anime of Sonic X. What? And then, of course, as you know, the modern stories of it right now, which is the IDW comics, which, of course, is written by Ian Flynn, who was also the writer of the Archie comics back then, but now is the writer of these. Which, in truth, actually, the IDW comics specifically are actually related and are connected to the mainline Sonic games. They're basically just stories that pretty much wound up like whether they happened before or after the certain events in one of the modern line Sonic games that we know and love. Like, take for example the battle for Angel Island, for instance. This specifically actually took place after the events of Sonic Forces, which then of course after that takes place with the Zombot virus. I could literally name another bunch of them, like Scrapnik Island, for example, or also the upcoming volumes that have actually happened right now, just recently, with Sage finally being in the IDW comics, who is specifically from Sonic Frontiers, which is going to be playing a massive role specifically in the Sonic franchise, along with the Sonic lore, both in the games and also in the IDW comics. Oh, and don't freaking get me started based on the other particular Sonic, TV series like The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Underground. All of that are completely different sets of canon in their own right, which literally is the exact same thing for FNAF. As I mentioned before, the books and the games are completely separate from each other, every single book series and every single game series. While the games, of course, however, are being particularly canon throughout most of the time. It's just that Scott and Steelwell are just basically trying to put elements from the books, like the Mega Pizzaplex Tales, for example, and they're basically just adding them in there and expanding that specifically for the games only. Well, if you actually take the Fazbear Frights books, for example, take for Into the Pit, which was once first a Fazbear Frights book story, which then actually became a spin-off as a actual spin-off game. Whether that game is specifically connected to the games, which I wouldn't be surprised, well, originally the Fazbear Frights books Into the Pit is completely different from that game entirely. So the game version is connected to the games of FNAF, of Into the Pit, while the Into the Pit book is completely different. Just to basically sum that all up. Now, what about the lineup of characters? Well, that is actually true. Both pretty much Five Nights at Freddy's and Sonic have a massive, and I mean literally massive, roster of characters that you can never be able to count as many, even if you tried starting over from number 1 to Sonic himself or even Freddy himself. Well, basically Sonic has a massive lineup of various different characters along the lines that only basically bring up like different versions of themselves, like classic Sonic and the other classic versions of the original gang. But then, of course, don't forget you have the modern version of the characters. But only the modern version of those Sonic characters will always be, pretty much the most ongoing thing and always builds up. Especially when you count, of course, the TV series or the comic versions of every single character, which basically, of course, have multiple rosters of characters that are completely different from each other, but it's still a lot of characters. The same thing goes with FNAF. FNAF characters, do you see how many freaking animatronics that they have made? All the way from the classics in FNAF 1 to the Glamrock animatronics from Security Breach. Not to also mention the FNAF World animatronics. This is like that's like a massive roster entirely. Also, you should freaking see the Five Nights at Freddy's fan game Ultra Custom Night, which is basically Ultimate Custom Night, but it's way expanded with several more characters in line. Whether you also consider those specific characters that are in Ultra Custom Night canon or not is another thing, because, that's just way too many to count, and some of them aren't even characters, they're just basically like obstacles or items. Not to also mention that even some of the characters in Five Nights at Freddy's aren't even canon, like Nightmare Mangle, for example, the Jacko animatronics also, from the FNAF 4 Halloween update. Nightmarion, apparently he's supposed to be the supposedly canon character, but that's only thanks because of Help Wanted. Not to also mention that there's been several freaking Nightmarion plushies everywhere, and of course, as you would know, if you've seen John from FNAF, he goes absolutely bizarre when he freaking sees a single freaking Nightmarion plush. I know basically that Nightmarion is supposed to be symbolistic, but Jesus, like far out, like the guy's not even canon, but apparently they made him quite canon, I guess, in a way, thanks to Help Wanted anyways. But overall, basically both of those franchises have such a lineup of roster characters, it's absolutely ridiculous. And also, if I'm being honest, I was actually thinking about doing like a freaking Sonic versus Five Nights at Freddy's death battle analysis at some point in time. Not right now though, I am actually going to be doing that for a different set of characters, which I did once, but I never did full analysis on them. So get ready for what I'm about to tell you there. I will do the Sonic vs. FNAF one at some point in time in the future, but I wanted to get with these ones first, and maybe a few other ones after, and we'll see how we go. Actually, when you think about it, when it comes to characters, forget about Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. Make it Sonic and Freddy's at the Olympic Games. What else is a franchise without its merchandise? I mean, come on, you obviously have to see this one coming. As far as video games go, I mean, of course, let's not forget about basically like so many other types of merchandises within them themselves. I mean, also, not also just the books even. There's like freaking food apparently as well based in Sonic. That depends on where you're from. Not to also mention that FNAF also has its very own cookbook to actually cook your own food if anyone has actually got it. And of course, we can't forget about the main classics like Lego, for example. And literally, I'm not even kidding when I say this, but yes, FNAF has actually collaborated with Lego and also with Sonic. Sonic has actually been doing pretty good recently with Lego. And of course, the rest of it goes on. You get Sonic plushies, you get FNAF plushies, which aren't a really big surprise. And then if you actually move on to, you know, the TV series or films or shows or whatever, like I actually mentioned before, like, you know, Sonic Underground and The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog or Sonic X. Sonic Prime even is one of them. And let's not forget about Sonic Boom if anyone else remembers it. I know I have, because I've actually seen every single episode of Sonic Boom in existence. And let's not also forget to mention about the movies. Sonic has their own movies now. So they're making movies with Paramount. They've already made 3 movies, which are great. They are on their way to making their 4th movie. And let's not forget to mention about, you know, the FNAF movies as well. I mean, let's be real. Even though technically that the first 2 movies have not exactly been well received enough, don't forget that there is going to be a 3rd one, and whether or not that the 3rd one's going to be successful into, you know, making up the budget and also hopefully be able to expand the cinematic universe of FNAF as well is also another thing. I mean, since they've already got the movies down at this rate, when the 3rd movie is up, they could probably even do some of their own spin-off shows or something. Kind of similar to like maybe the Fazbear Frights books, for example. Do spin-offs of those, for example. Or even do some spin-off series of the Mega Tales of the Pizzaplex books. To be fair, that's actually not a bad idea. They could possibly go with that route. Just like how Sonic has actually managed to do a spin-off series in Paramount, which is the Knuckles series. And I'm not quite sure if there's going to be even furthermore like a season 2 for Knuckles or maybe a Shadow the Hedgehog series, or whether people say that that's going to be a series or a movie, for instance, for Shadow specifically is going to be a completely different story. We haven't heard much of that for a while, but hopefully at some point we might. But I'm pretty sure you all get the point and you get the idea. I mean, surely enough you were made to realize that there is so much going on, especially in terms of the filming industry for both of these franchises as well. It's bigger than ever been before. And of course, the franchise alone itself can't be without its own community or fan base. I'm pretty sure it's that very well obvious that when it comes to both Sonic and Five Nights at Freddy's is that pretty much that, well, I'm, as like all of you, I love both Sonic and Five Nights at Freddy's. I love them both pretty much to death in the last few years. Especially since, you know, I'm also a big fan of other gaming franchises like Mario, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, and any other particular games that I have been interested throughout the past that I've actually played, whether on or off camera. Us as a community in both of these franchises, whether you like one or the other, or even both, like myself for example, pretty much have always have a special place in our hearts, and this is why we always continuously keep talking about them. Because, well, we obviously love them. We love it as a as a fan. We love them as a fan base of our community. No matter how awesome, no matter how weird, no matter how freaking crazy or chaotic that it actually is, a lot of us will always have come up with some crazy ideas, or even the most awesome ones would also be crazy as well, to, you know, just come up with these ideas. Like how we've had these, like how I'm making this video, for example, where I'm pretty much basically going off from, you know, MR Springs, but trying to talk about it in more details, which, by the way, props to MR Springs, actually, for mentioning to me about this video, like, 2 years ago, actually, now I think about it, so props to you on that one. But this is also why it really kind of interested me, also myself, to also talk about this video, because not many of us have actually realized, you know, you may think it's a bit of a silly idea to talk about it, but then you realize, oh, shite, this actually makes a lot of sense. These two franchises are kind of similar. They have a lot more in common than you think. And I'm not just talking about us YouTubers who actually talk about or play their games. We also play basically a lot of fan games as well. The fan games of both Sonic and Five Nights at Freddy's. Do you know how many fan games we have for Sonic and FNAF? There is just so many now lately these days. And I'm not kidding. I mean, heck, I'm even now trying to get back into the swing of playing some Five Nights at Freddy's fan games now, finally, after so freaking long, apart from just waiting for a mainline FNAF title. I played also, like, several Sonic fan games, specifically maybe on Dreams, or maybe some, like, Sonic mods, for example, like, you know, the Mega Mix Mania, which, by the way, I'm actually going to be showcasing you guys that myself on this channel too, along with also playing Sonic Forces Overclocked mod, which I have played before. I'm still waiting on the 2.0 edition, and so much more. I think you kind of realize now that us as a community in both of these franchises, we put so much heart and soul into more than what the original companies do. Literally, to these franchises, we try to make it better and make it more awesome than we could ever possibly imagine. Literally, as everyone says, the possibilities are endless. What pretty much makes it so special between the two franchises, how much the love and care that we have actually gone through this far for both of them, and to see what actually comes next for each of their next chapters for each of them in the franchise. Like, how far can they go? Like, really, like, actually, how far can they possibly go? Though in some cases, there will be a time that they'll have to stop, and there will be a limit. But I guess at this rate, we won't have to wait for that part anytime soon, because we got plenty of years to go. We do have nothing but time on our hands after all. Now, here's the thing. Before I actually finish off this video in particular, I did actually have this idea in mind. Now, this is, once again, kind of a bit like of a discussion ideas video, like I have been doing a few times in the past, especially up to now. But I came up with the idea of what would happen if Sonic and Five Nights at Freddy's actually did collaborate with each other. Look, I know that actually sounds absolutely weird, but let's say, for example, like how I talked about in one of my YouTube shorts, like, you know, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach collaborating in Sonic Racing Crossworlds. If you have not seen that YouTube shorts, go ahead and check that out. And that was just basically like just the startup for like if they wanted to do that with an actual just, you know, racing collaboration, because honestly, I do feel like that is a good starter. But what would happen if they had like actual mainline titles, or maybe like DLC, for example, or some type of spin-off along the lines between Sonic and FNAF? So the best way I could do this specifically was that, one, I wanted to figure out, like, you know, what would happen if FNAF came to Sonic's world, and then the other one, which is where Sonic was in FNAF world, was in the world of FNAF. And I'm not literally talking about FNAF world, literally. I'm literally just talking about the whole, you know, generality of FNAF in general. If FNAF were to ever come into the world of Sonic the Hedgehog, for example, what would the game be like, and who exactly would we have? Also, how exactly would it really work? Being that Sonic specifically is more fast-paced more than anything, it will be very hard for, like, when it comes to the characters to actually kind of sort of keep up, I guess. But you can probably have like an also like, you know, a new game mechanic, like kind of like Sonic Frontiers, for example, to give the characters not just only with, you know, having to boost, but also have their own unique abilities. Kind of similar to Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, for example. Like, you know, how not all the characters have to deal with, you know, mostly speed, for instance. You know, like Tails' machinery or even Eggman's machinery, for example, in Sonic Adventure 2. That's one idea. Or even like, you know, Knuckles and Rouge's treasure hunting skills back then. I mean, you could probably do something like that in particular. So my thought of this is that the only few characters that I think could possibly make it into the world of Sonic, first off, let's work on the heroes, are obviously Freddy, Glamrock Freddy from Security Breach, for example. He's probably like the main big show of the entirety of the franchise by far. And plus, I was thinking about also adding Roxanne Wolf, for example, because she is the kind of character who likes to race. She may not be the fastest character, but she is fast in her own right. But she is a good racer. And of course, she has that kind of like ego that is pretty much contained within her, kind of a bit like Sonic's cockiness. I think those two would probably work well together in some way, shape, or form, which would be pretty neat and handy. Now, I don't know if Gregory would be good into Phineas, not even Cassie. I don't think Vanessa would work either, so I'm canceling all the human characters out. If they were going to be talking about human characters also, like, you know, William Afton as Springtrap, for example, I know probably a lot of people would probably think about that because, you know, William Afton, Dr. Eggman, they're both, you know, inventor geniuses and whatever, but Eggman's more powerful and Springtrap is more twisted. But if I'm being completely honest, that's not exactly the kind of you know, Sonic FNAF team up I was kind of going for the villain side. I was kind of going for a completely different approach. My thoughts were aiming towards Nightmare. Nightmare from FNAF 4 specifically, and you're probably wondering to yourself, I mean, who the heck can you possibly team up with a character with Nightmare? Who's the best Sonic character for that kind of, you know, situation? Well, my only best thought about this was specifically Eggman Nega. Now, a lot of people, again, are probably going to say that, you know, Eggman Nega is dead. Not really. He's not really dead. He was just basically trapped in a card or like a photo due to his experiment backfiring on him since the ending of Sonic Rivals 2. However, in replacement of Dr. Eggman Nega, I actually thought about his own creation, Metal Sonic 3.0. And can you also imagine him, Metal Sonic 3.0, in his Neo 3.0 form, working alongside with Nightmare? And let's not forget, like, a lot of people say that Nightmare is specifically, like, well, in the game files of FNAF 4, that he is Shadow Freddy. So, I don't know, we could possibly see some sort of interesting collaboration there. I mean, it's pretty dark. I mean, they're both pretty deadly. And since that Metal Sonic 3.0 would have the exact same vision as Eggman Nega, because Eggman Nega did also have the urge to kill Sonic in Blaze in Sonic Rush. And Nightmare is kind of that exact same character, but he's a real big mystery that could probably maybe can be solved a little bit, unless, you know, it will be held off for later. But I do feel like that these two specifically as villains would actually work perfectly. Also, their color scheme, black and yellow, which is pretty obvious. I mean, I just had to go with it because it absolutely just makes sense to me, and it just feels, you know how well that black and yellow really go well together. Well, Neo Metal Sonic 3.0 is based on, you know, the machinery mechanics. Well, Nightmare might have a little bit of not just machinery, but also some of the supernatural effects. Whether he's kind of considered as like some sort of weird, like kind of spirit, ghost, or regular, or being the interesting shadow animatronic that he kind of is. I could see a lot of potential with these two actually working together. Also, another thing that I just actually want to point out before I go to, you know, Sonic traveling to FNAF, into the world of FNAF, I did think about Sonic Dream Team for this idea as well, because you know how Shadow's story actually involves with like traveling through, you know, these nightmares that he has to, you know, fix up in the dreams that, you know, are in Sonic Dream Team. I completely forgot it. I couldn't completely realize this, but like, can you imagine if Nightmare also was in Sonic Dream Team as like a boss fight, and Shadow would have to be the one to take him down? That would be so cool. Like, just have him as like Shadow Freddy because he's purple, just like those creepy eye things that are in the level. But then he can then evolve into like Nightmare, for example. I don't know. Just a little thing I just thought of myself, which by the way, he kind of also works with Black Doom as well, actually, since that he actually did. So that Black Doom actually did, like, create this nightmare for Shadow in the Dark Beginnings prologue. That could work as well. Okay, now we're moving on to what happens if Sonic were to actually travel into the Fnaf universe. Well, since I've been doing the fact that when it comes to the world of Fnaf, speaking if you also kind of take in, like, Security Breach, Ruin, for example, or even The Secret of the Mimic. And the reason why I'm going for those kind of types of environments because, well, in the worlds of the humans, it kind of reminds me a lot of the Sonic movie pack in Shadow Generation specifically. Like our example when our game Shadow transformed into the Keanu Reeves Shadow in the game and, you know, he had a completely different voice. You may be able to actually try to add something like that in if you were actually able to get some of the characters from the movies, for example, to, you know, to do their voices, or you could just stick with, you know, the original models of the modern characters as we know rather than the movie ones. I don't know, it's up to you. But unfortunately, we can't actually we're not going to actually have the Sonic characters have their usual, you know, gameplay mechanic. Instead, it does have to be kind of somewhat slow paced, and of course, we need to put this in first person view. So there's only a few characters that I was thinking about specifically that could potentially work with this. You could probably put them in pairs, or you could have a team. And my best only solution for this was specifically Team Dark or Team Chaotix. Or kind of like having a bit of a mixture of both. Team Chaotix would actually make a lot of sense because, as you all know, Team Chaotix are, of course, a detective agency. And just like how you've seen the Chaotix case files literally not too long ago, since I think last month, I'm pretty sure, pretty much had like an entire detective, you know, adventure series that they had as an entire podcast. So it really wouldn't surprise me if all of Team Chaotix were up for the job to, you know, spot some differences and do specific tasks. Very slow paced though, rather than, you know, like how they did the, you know, the work in Sonic Heroes, for example. Maybe you could probably perhaps switch into different to the different characters in first person view after when each and every task is complete, while also trying to avoid getting jump scared by animatronics. Team Dark, on the other hand, could also be another good choice because due to the fact that, one, they are pretty much very serious, and as much as they go through into investigations themselves, not like the Chaotix though, but they at least are kind of serious and they do at least kind of get the job done. And also, hey, you got Omega. If you want to freaking beat up some other kind of animatronics, Omega's your guy. Or, however, this was the other thing. I actually managed to do, like, a bit of a mix-up of, like, you know, of pairs. Or you can do, like, a mix-up of literally 3 characters. So, here's the list. I'm gonna actually just bring you up here right now that you can see right here in this list here. Apart from their OG, you know, teams alone, but I also managed to put some mix-ups as well to figure out, you know, which one's actually the best one. In the pair selection, I actually kind of do like Shadow and Vector and Shadow and SBO, which would also make a lot of sense. Same thing for Shadow and Omega. That's obviously my favorite touch. I know a lot of people are going to be going crazy for freaking Rouge and SBO because thanks to the Chaotix case files, which some people are absolutely just really just going nuts over it. I can definitely see Omega and Vector maybe in pairs for this one because they are both powerhouses. Well, Vector is like, you know, the brains and the brawn, but Omega is like literally just the brains and the destruction. And as for the team of 3, like, you know, having Shadow Rouge and then Vector, for example, Shadow Rouge SBO, Shadow Rouge Tommy, so on and so forth. There was a lot of mix and matches that I was able to put in, like, together to see, like, who was actually the best team to actually have as, like, a complete pair-up. if any of these 2 or 3 characters out of the 6 were to actually, like, you know, enter in the universe of Fnaf. Let me know what you guys think, like, well, which one out of those teams do you think is best for them to, you know, to travel into the Fnaf universe. Now, you're probably also wondering who exactly would be the best villains to also fill out this as well. I don't know. To be very frankly honest with you, I could see, you know, Neo Metal Sonic and the Mimic teaming up because they can both copy other people. That could be a good lineup, for instance. Unless if I actually add in, like, you know, Nightmare and Neo Metal Sonic 3.0 again in that universe as well, which actually wouldn't surprise me because that would totally make a lot of sense too. Unless if anyone else was, like, thinking of adding maybe, like, Nightmare and Mephiles, although technically speaking that wouldn't exactly work because since Mephiles is still trapped in white space. And I know that Infinite has made a return finally, thanks to the Chaotix case files as well, but I don't know, it's very hard to fit him at the moment somewhere. Having him like team up with like Nightmare, for example, or any other animatronic that is at least somewhat of a threat at this point in time, it's really hard for me to tell. I really don't know if I could see it at the moment. Or even other characters such as, like, maybe Tails Doll, for example. Tails Doll with maybe Plush Trap, for example. That would be so hilarious. And even though also that Nightmare Balloon Boy also is not canon as well, thanks to the FNAF 4 Halloween update, well, also in Ultimate Custom Night and Help Wanted 1, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a possibility for have, you know, Tails Doll and, you know, Nightmare Balloon Boy. And since that Tails Doll, I guess, is consideredly actually also known as Metal Tails, thanks to Sonic Superstars, you could add that as a transformation for him as well. I don't really know. There are some pretty unique picks when it comes to the villains in this case, but I mean, rarely any good ones. But these are the ones that I could basically really top off. So you also let me know in the comments below. And also let me know in the comments below what you guys all think of what you guys all think about what I actually mentioned throughout this entire video. Do you think that Sonic and Five Nights at Freddy's are both franchises that have a lot more in common based on everything that I have said? Do you think that Sonic is able to travel into the world, collab into the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, and is Five Nights at Freddy's able to collab into the world of Sonic? So thank you guys so much for watching this video with me today, and if you haven't already, like this video, click on subscribe if you haven't already if you're new to the channel, click on the notification bell to never miss a video, and as always, stay safe, stay healthy. My name is Mad Dog, and may your days be mad and rad.